What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Monday, August 12th edition of the Ship My Money Show, Tournament Edition. Taking a look at tonight's 8-game MLB slate for the large field DraftKings tournaments. Going to walk through how my lineups would be looking if I had entered them at around 4:30. As you can see up here at the top, didn't have a lot of lineups available when I did go through my process. I know some more have come out as the day has gone on, but going to take a look at how I would be approaching this slate, talk through what I like, what I don't like. And I will preface this by saying, after taking a quick glance at my lineups, there's actually a lot that I don't like. I do think that there is an adjustment that needs to be made going from the $15 or $18 flagship tournament where you're playing against like 14,000 entries to the $5 where you're playing against 60,000. And I'm not really convinced that some industry tools handle it that well. It is something that I probably need to make some adjustments for in my personal process, because I had pretty much tailored a process that I really liked for those like 10 to 20,000 entry tournaments. And then now suddenly they are 50,000, give or take. So I do probably need to make some adjustments, and I'll talk through why I think that is. But I'm going to walk through how these lineups are looking. And obviously, we can talk strategy. We can talk what I do and don't like I said. So I'm going to go through that, going position by position and stack by stack. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in chat. I will answer them as I see them, assuming that I know the answer to them. So starting with the pitching on this one, I will also say my player exposures I'm pretty happy with as far as like how much I'm getting to of the top guys. You can see that my highest owned pitcher here is right around 45% in Brandon Pfaadt in a good matchup against Colorado. My highest owned hitter is around 30%. Those numbers are fine. The thing that I think I am going to have an issue with going through the show is that the total ownership in a lot of my lineups is just not particularly appealing when I'm trying to beat 50,000 entries as opposed to a lot less than that. So that is something that we'll talk about. But the individual player exposures I am mostly pretty happy with, at least at first glance. And we can see here, primarily getting to 4 pitchers. They are all pretty popular. Brandon Pfaadt, Chris Sale, Blake Snell, Luis Heel, all showing up quite a bit for me, and I would expect that. The field is there as well. Not really taking any huge stands on these guys, getting to them 40 to 50%. The field's getting to them like 30 to 50%, depending on which one it is. Brandon Pfaadt at 8,600 is one of the lower owned of those 4. It is a good matchup for him against Colorado. He has been solid overall this season. 22.2% strikeout percentage, 3.76 xFIP. He gets the Rockies outside of Colorado, which is obviously really nice. The price tag at 8,600 does allow you to afford some pretty expensive bats. So I like getting there. Cam in chat said, agree, the chalk today seems better than most days, probably because it's a relatively smaller slate too. Yeah, that is a good point also. Like, I'm saying that at first glance, I don't exactly like the lineups that I looked at, but you do also have to keep in mind that things are slate specific, and the Yankees look really good today. The popular pitching looks really good today. So, there are some ways that you can combat that. But I've said it on previous shows too, that sometimes what just kind of ends up happening for me, especially as more and more of the field is playing at a relatively high level and using either optimizers really effectively or using sims or both or whatever it may be, you get a lot of situations sometimes where the best plays are popular, but then like the second, third, and fourth best plays are, when you consider their chances of success versus the top plays, they're just as popular or even more popular than they should be. And it kind of just like pushes you back to the best plays, so that happens for me a lot. And often on slates like that, I think what just kind of ends up happening is not that many players have a particularly high expected ROI for slates like that. But it can kind of push you into a situation where you're saying, okay, either I'm going to be playing some pretty chalky guys, or I'm playing some really, really low probability stuff that isn't necessarily good either. So I don't want to necessarily say that the lineups that I don't like from looking at are bad, because again, it is slate dependent and I didn't look at them long enough to really have an opinion, but I am not thrilled with the total ownership. But again, that could just be a product of the slate for the reasons that Cam said. It is also an 8-gamer, as he mentioned as well. So you're just going to get higher ownership in general. Chris Sale, Blake Snell, Luis Heel, these are all pretty self-explanatory, I think. Chris Sale going up against a Giants team in San Francisco that is not the best team, and it's a very good hitter's park. 6th highest K percentage against left-handed pitching since the start of last season. They do have a 125 WRC plus on their active roster. Sale does come into the game with a 32.5% strikeout percentage and 2.6 xFIP this year. Blake Snell striking out 31.5% of hitters so far, 3.39 xFIP. Atlanta ranked 7th, or tied with San Francisco, actually, for 6th in strikeout percentage since the start of last year. 122 WRC plus against lefties. So again, it's not a safe spot, but Blake Snell at 9,300 against a team that does strike out a lot in a very good park for pitching. It's very, very obvious why you would want to get there, and I'm around the field. Luis Gil going up against the White Sox, again, very, very obvious at only 9K. He has kind of started to drop off a little bit as the season's gone on at times, which isn't surprising, but overall 28.5% K percentage. His 12% walk percentage is much higher than you should be comfortable with. 4.12 xFIP isn't all that good. It's certainly not in line with these other pitchers that you can play. His ERA is 3.06, so he has been pretty lucky according to underlying metrics as far as preventing runs, but still plenty of strikeout upside. A very, very good matchup against the White Sox. They rank tied for 9th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year. They somehow have a 74 WRC plus on their active roster, which is like impossibly bad. So all 4 of those pitchers just look really, really good. Then you get to Freddie Peralta, who's also 15%. He gives you a lot of strikeout upside as well. 29.4% K percentage, 3.66 xFIP this year, but he does have the matchup with the Dodgers that is obviously on a totally different level than a matchup with, say, Colorado or the White Sox. So I'm getting around the field on him. And then I'm kind of just getting to small amounts of Singer, Kershaw, whatever a Brad Blaylock is. He's 4K, so that's probably why he showed up a little bit. Francis showing up a little bit as a value. Pablo Lopez. I'm not getting nearly as much as the field on him. I don't really know why, other than I guess I'm just allocating so much of it to these 4 at the top plus Peralta that I don't have that much left for Lopez. But he is a relatively popular pitcher that I'm actually not getting to. Him, and actually he's the only pitcher projected for double-digit ownership that I am not, at least even with the field, if not higher. And it's probably just a product of him getting squeezed out by these guys a little bit. You can see over here, I do have him projected a little bit lower, about a point behind Freddie Peralta, a few points behind everybody else. And saying that a pitcher is projected a point lower than somebody else, it's still a very, very similar range of outcomes. But if they're going to be the same ownership and I have a higher projection on Peralta, then I would want Peralta to be showing up more typically. So I don't have any issue with that. And, pretty much explains why that is happening. So I'm pretty much around the field on the popular pitching with the exception of Lopez. I'm not making any crazy plays on low-owned pitchers either. So pitching pretty straightforward. Now take a look at stacks. Yankees, not surprisingly, showing up a ton, showing up as far as all stack types go in 43% of the 150 lineups that I built. 5-mans showing up around 25, 26% of the time. So I'm getting to them a lot, which, like I said, I obviously understand why it's happening. They have an implied run total north of 6. They're going up against a White Sox team that is obviously not very good. Bad bullpen behind, behind the starter. So it's just a spot where the Yankees can add on a lot of runs potentially. Kai Busch on the mound making his second, I believe, major league start. So it's very, very, very obviously a good spot for the Yankees. The only concern is, the ownership that you have to take on because they are clearly going to be a popular team. But they obviously look very, very good. Toronto, Texas showing up 2nd and 3rd as far as all stack types go. Texas in Fenway Park, near 5 implied run total. Certainly happy to get to them. Good park for offense and all of that. Toronto in Angel Stadium, another good park for offense. Happy to get there. Looking at the 5-mans, they are also 2nd and 3rd. Then you get a pretty big drop off to where I'm just kind of mixing and matching a lot of other teams. I think with these teams, there's no real preference for me. I could run through my process, again, and Arizona falls down here where Boston is and vice versa. So I don't think there's any real clear preference on these other teams, but it does look like a night we're building around the Yankees, the Blue Jays, and Texas is pretty appealing to me. And again, I like those parks. I love the matchup for New York, both the bullpen and the starter. Brian Bayo going for Boston, not a bad pitcher, but doesn't miss a ton of bats, about a 22% strikeout percentage, 3.74 xFIP. When he's on, he gets a lot of ground balls, but this park, again, is just really good for offense. So the upside for the Rangers is really high. Bayo has allowed a 203 expected ISO to lefties this year. He's also only struck them out about 18.5% of the time. 134 expected ISO to righties. He does have a 26% strikeout percentage there. Davis Daniel pitching for the Angels. He has had some success in the majors so far, but he's not somebody that I expect to be particularly good going forward. The Blue Jays do have plenty of power. He has held righties to a 125 expected ISO this year in a very limited sample. So that is kind of working against Toronto since most of their best hitters are right-handed, but it's still a good park. It's still a lineup that is affordable and has plenty of power throughout it. It is also a little bit more left-handed heavy than it was earlier in the year. Now that you have Lo Perfido and you have Horwitz, they're both affordably priced and left-handed. So they make a lot of sense to me. And then you can see he's kind of mixing in these other teams. Three-mans, again, New York, Toronto. The White Sox get moved up a little bit here. This is probably a result of trying to balance some of the chalk that I'm getting to. Like I'm getting the popular pitching, I'm getting to popular bats, really trying to be different somewhere, and not necessarily just in the sense of low-owned hitters, but by going to the White Sox, you do get that negative correlation against a popular Luis Gil as well. So let's say I'm going to a 5-man Yankee stack where I have two of the popular pitchers that aren't Luis Gil. It makes sense to be getting to, the White Sox or the Braves or the Giants, any of these teams that if they do well, not only are you getting low-owned plays or low-owned hitters that are doing well, but you're getting a popular pitcher not doing well, which is going to help because like a large percentage of your Yankee stacks, for example, are going to have Luis Gil also because he's one of the best pitching plays. So at least, if you pair him with the White Sox, you are knocking off a large chunk of the Yankee stacks that were played just by knocking off the pitcher. So that's why I think getting to a team like the White Sox as a mini stack makes sense. They're my most used 2-man. They're up there as far as 3-mans also. Same goes for the Angels here, just getting to them a decent amount. They fit nicely into lineups. Dodgers against Peralta as a 2-man. Obviously going to like that despite the difficult matchup against Peralta. It's just a good offense, and Peralta is getting some ownership as well. So not really getting to like Colorado or San Francisco or Atlanta. But Steven Leibowitz had asked earlier, I think, about potentially getting, he said, it isn't crazy to have a little exposure to Braves and Giants bats and tax some ownership. Yeah, completely agree. The White Sox appear to be the team that I'm kind of doing that with, but I wouldn't be upset if Atlanta and or the Giants were kind of popping up there as well, just in lineups where I don't have Sale or I don't have Snell. At that point, I already need them to not have a good game. So in a 50,000 plus entry tournament, why not just go the next step and benefit fully when they don't have a good game? Perfectly good way to make lineups. And like I was saying with the White Sox, it is doubly powerful basically in giving you a path to the top of tournaments. So now looking, going position by position, looking at what I'm getting to at catcher, Alejandro Kirk showing up the most for me right now. Didn't have a Blue Jays lineup when I made this. Still don't think it's out, but if he is in, 3,100 going up against Daniel. Like I said, Daniel has been pretty good so far at limiting power to righties, but it is a very small sample. And one thing to like about Kirk as well as a catcher that I think I've mentioned before, in DFS tournaments, getting, contact heavy guys isn't the most important or most appealing thing because home runs win you tournaments. But at catcher, where it's really difficult to find guys that can hit, period, somebody that's cheap like Kirk that is difficult to strike out is a little bit more appealing just because like he can actually put the ball in play and you're not shocked when he doesn't just strike out 3 times in a game like, a lot of catchers. So at that price, I like getting to him. Ownership is there as well. Ownership coming into Austin Wells also, which isn't surprising. 4K, batting 5th in the matchup against Busch and a not very good White Sox bullpen. So those guys obviously are going to look pretty good. Jonah Heim, Logan O'Hoppe, I'm pretty much around the field. Adrian Del Castillo, that's a mouthful. 2,100. I assume that's the catcher that Cam was asking about. He said, Adam, what are your thoughts on the 2.1K catcher in tournaments? He's kind of egregiously priced, but the ownership will also be ridiculous, so it's tough. Ownership coming in at 15%. So he's projected right now to be the highest owned catcher. I'm about half the field. I think you could make a case for getting to a little bit more, but yeah, I'm just around half the field on him. Pulling him up now just to see his Fangraphs page because I actually don't know off the top of my head how it looks. But yeah, I think he's fine. I think that, again, if I were to like just rerun through my process, you could see where maybe I play 8% Kirk and 15% Del Castillo. But it just worked out this way where I'm getting around half the field. He projects to be well below average as a hitter. Most of the projection systems on Fangraphs have him between like 79 and 90. Steamer actually has him at 100, which is pretty far off from everything else. 100 games at AAA this year, 145 WRC plus there. But that's also, if I remember correctly, Reno, I think, for Arizona, which is a good place to hit. So most of the projection systems have him as well below average going forward. Steamer has him a bit better. Either way, I think batting sixth for an Arizona team that has a 5.5 implied run total is clearly a good point per dollar value. But you're talking about at best, unproven average going forward major league hitter, more likely than not average going forward major league hitter. So I do think it's a spot where, we're getting under the field on him makes sense to me. Guys like Kirk, Wells, Heim, O'Hoppe, these are hitters that can actually do damage in the major leagues, and they're getting similar or less ownership. Obviously not quite the same price, but still affordable for the most part. O'Hoppe's relatively expensive. Keith Ape said in single entry he'll be 25% plus. Yeah, it seems pretty likely, I think, that he gets pushed up in single entry. The only counter that I would say to that is that single entry stuff, I think, tends, at least at higher stakes, tends to be more stack heavy. So if people aren't getting to Arizona stacks, maybe his ownership comes down a little bit and guys like Wells goes up. But yeah, at 2,100, batting sixth for a team with that implied run total, I do assume that he's more popular in single entry than large field. Joey Bart, I'm around 2x the field. Nothing that really stands out, but 3,400 projected to bat fifth for the Pirates. I'm a little under the field on Connor Wong. So nothing that stands out too much at catcher. For the most part, getting around the field on the quote-unquote best plays. But I am about half the field on Del Castillo, who's projected to be the highest owned guy. I'm a bit over on Joey Bart, like I said. For the most part, pretty much around the field on other guys, a little bit higher on Jonah Heim as well. And I had mentioned I'm getting to a lot of Texas, so that's also a reason that Heim's getting pushed up against Bayo. Does give you a bat from the left side, which is the side that Bayo, not surprisingly, has had more trouble with. At first base, getting to Vlad, LeMahieu, Josh Bell. Again, mostly in line with the field on those guys. I am over on Guerrero. He's getting less ownership than LeMahieu. He's getting less ownership than Bell. So I do like that. Very, very good offensive season once again for Vlad. Daniel, like I mentioned before, in the limited sample, has held righties to about a 125 expected ISO, but you're talking like 185 pitches. I will certainly take my chances with him. Vlad, 162 WRC plus so far this season, 224 ISO, just having a monster year. Rogers Center is good for right-handed power, so him going to Anaheim isn't necessarily a huge bump, but it's not bad. It's still, a park that's good for hitting home runs, good for scoring runs in general. So I like getting there when he's projected to be like the fourth, fifth highest owned first baseman, especially when the popular first basemen are guys that don't hit a lot of home runs either. Josh Bell, Donovan Solano, DJ LeMahieu. I'm sure I'm talking these guys into a bunch of homers now, but you kind of have the field projected to use first base as a value position so that they can afford the Yankees or they can afford those popular pitchers or whatever it may be. I like just getting to Vlad there, especially because he lost third base eligibility on DraftKings again. So it's not like people are paying down at first base and then just playing Vlad at third base. If you're playing Vlad at, modest 10% ownership, these people that you could play Vlad and LeMahieu, but other than that, like if you have Josh Bell, if you have Nathaniel Lowe, you don't have Vlad. So I do like that aspect as well. If people are going to pay down at first base, I'm getting around 2x the field on Freddie Freeman. So again, just getting to a pay up option at first base that is really, really good at a position that a lot of the field is projected to pay down at. I am getting to LeMahieu. I am getting to Bell also. Certainly don't love LeMahieu, but 2,500. He's batting ninth. He's on the Yankees. You save some money. I get the ownership, but he's not the type of hitter either that I'm scared to not have. If you're somebody that is building lineups and you just don't want to click on DJ LeMahieu, perfectly fine. If he puts up a score that you have to have, you got pretty unlucky. So wouldn't mind getting less of him, but right now, pretty much in line with the field. I'm assuming I actually have a little bit more because this is just showing where I have him at first base. Josh Bell, pretty much in line with the field. Same for Hoskins. Nothing that really stands out here other than I'm not getting to much Solano, at least at first base. I'm not getting to much Low. The field is getting to those guys. I only have 3% Ohtani at first base. Field's at about 8. But, again, nothing that stands out too much for me at first base. I don't have any huge stands, but I do really like getting to Guerrero here, given, for all the reasons I said, power upside, a pitcher in Daniel that I don't think is actually very good hitter's park, and just the fact that you can't play him with a lot of the more popular hitters on the slate because people are paying down at first base. Going to second base, Gleyber Torres, 19% ownership. I'm getting to 21%. Just very obviously good value. Batting sixth, 3,600. Good matchup. You say what you want about him as a baseball player these days, but in the middle of that lineup at that price, he just looks really, really good. Second base, obviously not the best position either. Marcus Semien, also going to be pretty popular at 4,700, batting leadoff in Fenway. Bayo is much better at limiting power to righties, but Fenway does play up right-handed power as well. So I do still like this price tag on Semien. I'm getting around 2x the field on Massey at 4K. So that is a spot where I am negatively correlating with the field a bit. Pablo Lopez, we talked about at pitcher, projected to get around 15% ownership. I wasn't really getting to him. He was the only pitcher above 10% that I wasn't getting to. May as well take some shots. We had a little bit of Vinny Pasquantino at first base, getting to Massey around 2x the field here, leading off at second base. I think that looks pretty good. I'm around the field on Horwitz. I like that. First base, second base eligible, 3,800, has the platoon advantage against Davis Daniel in that park that does play up left-handed power as well. It's a park upgrade for the left-handed bats on the Blue Jays. Rogers Center, better for right-handed power than left-handed power. Angel Stadium, at least going from memory, better for left-handed power than right-handed power since they moved the right field wall in 4 or 5 years ago, whatever it was. Davis Schneider, again, showing up. I'm getting to the Blue Jays, so that's not too surprising. And then just kind of a handful of a bunch of other guys down here. If we look at what the field is projected to do, I'm half the field on Brandon Drury. So this just looks like another guy where the field's probably just using him as a value bat to mix in other, to mix in expensive guys. If you add in my third base exposure, which was, I think, like 4 or 6%, I already forgot, but I'm right around the field total. My 6% here is just showing second base. Horwitz, Schneider, I'm around the field. But it's kind of, and this is what I was alluding to at the top of the show, a lot of times on, especially like these 8-game slates where there is good chalk, this is what ends up happening for me is obviously Torres, Semien, Drury, these guys are more popular, but I think it's deserved. And so basically what's happening, if you look at like my exposures versus the field's ownership, is you have these plays at the top that the field is getting to. And I think that they're the best plays of the position by a big enough margin that I would rather play them at this ownership than play the next tier of guys at like 7, 8, 9% ownership. So basically, like I think Gleyber Torres at 19% owned, when you factor in his range of outcomes, his salary, what you can fit into your lineups with him, the team, who he positively correlates with, obviously, the other hitters on the Yankees. You factor all of that stuff in, I think his chances of success make him a better play at 19% than Willie Castro at 9%, for example, at 4,700, or Ketel Marte at 6,200. Not a knock on either of those guys. They just happen to be the two sitting here that I'm looking at. But that's why I think it kind of looks like this. And that does happen for me a lot, like I was saying, especially on these slates where if this were a 12 or a 13 game slate and you had the Yankees getting 15 to 20% ownership, you would just have that many more options to go to that are in reasonably good spots. With it being an 8-game slate and the field being as good as they are now at not just jamming in the best plays, you end up getting kind of more ownership going to the second best plays than is warranted. And it just kind of pushes you back to those top projected guys. So I think that's kind of what we see happening here. If you sort by field ownership, why I'm pretty much in line with like the top 5 and then just not getting to like the next tier. And then down at the bottom, you can see there are a couple guys I'm getting over the field on. Massey in particular, I'm over the field. So I think that's kind of why you see it showing up the way that it is. And I'm fine with that. The problem is just that you do run into and it's just kind of a problem with massive field tournaments in general when you have relatively limited options. Like you're just going to run into more dupe issues. You're going to run into just a massive number of lineups that look similar to yours, but I don't really know the perfect way to handle that because I don't want to just play really shitty teams and hope to get like super lucky. So it kind of just pushes me back to saying, okay, if the field is going to kind of overcorrect to get away from the best plays, I'm going to just play the best plays and hope that it works out. So that's why you see that shaking out the way that it is. Drop Roses said, any problem with running a Brave stack and being contrarian? I'm not getting to them, but I think it's perfectly fine. Like if you're going, I'm actually curious. Let me see what their projected ownership is. The one thing that concerns me with something like that, and so they're not projected for much ownership. So yeah, I think it's fine. I'm not getting to them. I'm pretty much doing the same thing the field is, but like not only are they low owned, they do, if they have success, knock a 40% owned pitcher off the board and give you a very clear path to winning. So I do think that taking an approach like that is perfectly fine. The thing that you do have to be careful with, if you're going into a slate looking to stack against, negatively correlate with chalk pitching, you do have to keep in mind that because of Sims, people are doing that more. A few years ago, you would get the Braves at like actual 1% ownership here. Now, even though they're projected for 1 or 2%, I assume they're probably going to be like 4 or 5%. So still low owned, but probably a lot closer to where they quote unquote should be based on their chances of success than you would have gotten a few years ago when everybody was just using Fantasy Cruncher, clicking optimize, and then playing Blake Snell plus Yankees. So that would be, the one general concern that you have to keep in mind when you're looking at something like that. And also the other problem with Atlanta specifically here is that this park does suck. And this goes back to why I think one of the reasons I think the chalk looks so good on this slate. Minnesota, not a great park for offense. Boston, good park. Minnesota, not. Milwaukee is, but you obviously have a good pitcher in Peralta. White Sox is fine. Angels is good. Arizona is mediocre, and obviously the Rockies suck. San Diego has been good for homers overall this year, but historically average at best. And then San Francisco is terrible. So you don't have many really good hitters parks here either. It makes, when you do have a good team in a neutral or better park, it just makes them stand out even more as well. So the problem that I'm getting to with the Braves, it is nice that they negatively correlate with Snell, and this goes for the Giants against Sale also. But even if the Braves score, let's say 5-6 runs against Blake Snell and make him a bad play, there's a high percentage of the time within the times that they score 5 or 6 runs where it's just like, a bunch of walks, some singles, some doubles, stuff that isn't actually winning you tournaments, assuming that these teams in good offensive parks actually hit home runs like they're pretty likely to do. So that's the other issue there. But again, when you're playing against 60,000 people, there's not a lot you can do that is actually like wrong, I don't think. And going to a Braves team that does have power against a popular pitcher certainly isn't wrong, even if it's not where I would be getting. Third base, again, getting LeMahieu showing up a little bit here, 8%. So that puts me at like 24% total on LeMahieu, which is absolutely disgusting. That is that's probably of the hitters that I've gone through so far, I like the least. If I could just not play $2,500 DJ LeMahieu, that would be fantastic. But also, I do understand why he's getting there. You can play him at 2 different positions. He's still positively correlating with the Yankees, even though he's sitting at the bottom of the order. If the Yankees come through, LeMahieu's projection is just higher than, his actual median projection is. Brandon Drury showing up a little bit, as I'd mentioned before. Jazz Chisholm at the top here. I do like this. Only projected for 8% ownership because he is relatively expensive. I have absolutely no idea why this guy is hitting 7th for the Yankees, other than, I actually have no idea. This team just isn't deep enough to have Jazz hitting 7th, but he is. That does knock his ownership down a little bit. 14 got to 14%. So I think that I'm pretty happy with that. I'm getting a little bit more Ernie Clement than the field, which isn't surprising since I'm getting to the Blue Jays. Royce Lewis always looks good if you can get there. Park's not great for homers, but 4,900 is a very fair price tag for him going up against Brady Singer. So I'm around the field there. LeMahieu, this is, like I said, I'm actually over the field because this is just showing third base exposure, even with the field on Josh Smith. So not a ton standing out there either. Solano, I am under the field. I only had 3% at third base. I think I had like 3% at first base. He's projected for 10% ownership. So that's another just good point per dollar value projection that doesn't have a lot of power upside. And so I don't mind, not getting a lot of him. I think he's similar to Drury. I think he's similar to LeMahieu, but obviously I am playing more Yankees stacks. So that's going to just pull up LeMahieu. Josh Smith, again, I'm pretty even there, at least at third base. Devers slightly below the field. Yeah, nothing really interesting at all at third base. I'm mostly just around the field on everything, which looks fine. I don't have any huge fades there, I don't think. Jorge said, any thoughts on how bad Yankees have been versus left-handed pitchers? No, I didn't even know they had been. It's just not. It's not something that's going to matter to me because of sample size. Who's in the Yankees lineup. Aaron Judge is obviously really good. Juan Soto hits left-handed pitching well. And then there's a drop-off to every other hitter. Austin Wells is left-handed. Josh Chisholm's left-handed. But it's not something that's going to matter too much. And also keep in mind when you're looking at splits like that, it's not as much of an issue if you're looking at right-handed because there's so many more right-handed starters. If you just go to a team and you look at what they've done against left-handed pitching, it's going to include left-handed relievers. And it's going to disproportionately weight how left-handed hitters have done against left-handed relievers that come in just to face them once. And it's just in a lot of cases going to give you misleading numbers. Not saying that is what has happened with the Yankees. It's just not something that I look at from an offensive standpoint because you're going to just have more success projecting Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Gleyber Torres, all these guys the way you normally would going forward based on their skill set, based on the way they project, than you are saying, oh, well, they've been bad against lefties so far this year because the sample size just isn't going to be there. And then also, like I said, the relief pitcher thing is something you have to keep in mind. Josh said Machado not in the lineup for San Diego. Yeah, so I did have him in, I assume, when I ran this. So that sucks. It does make the Padres look quite a bit weaker as well. Aiden said, I have a parlay on Yankees Diamondbacks. How do I feel about that? I don't have any thoughts on it. I don't know. Not something that, not being dismissive of that. I actually have no idea. It's not something I've looked at or thought about at all. The price obviously matters, and I don't have any sort of models in front of me for what I think the chances of either of those teams winning are. There was something else. Any love for the Blue Jays as a 3-man? Yeah, Blue Jays are one of my highest stacks overall and in 3-mans and then 5-mans. So I do like them quite a bit going up against Daniel. Shortstop, Anthony Volpe showing up a lot. Not surprising, but again, only getting 10% ownership. So this is another reason maybe why the Yankees as a stack are showing up as much for me as they are. If Jazz is actually going to be projected for 7 or 8% ownership and I can get around 2x the field there, Volpe's only going to get about 10% ownership and I can get around 2x the field there at 3,700. Using the bottom of the order for the Yankees, LeMahieu is popular, but if Jazz and Volpe are going to be less so, using them as ways to not be being contrarian within your Yankee stack obviously isn't the right word because they're still relatively popular, but a lot of Yankee stacks are going to not have them. And so that's one way you can be at least a little bit different. Corey Seager was hoping to be getting to him. The field is as well. I'm getting to 15%, field's at 14. Brian Bayo, like I said, much lower strikeout percentage against left-handed hitters, does give up a lot of power to lefties. Corey Seager, obviously really, really good. Also not the best shortstop slate today. You don't have De La Cruz. You don't have Gunnar Henderson. You do have Bobby Witt in a relatively unappealing matchup. He is still Bobby Witt, but not the best matchup against Lopez. So not the best shortstop position today. Makes Seager look a little bit better. Jimenez, I'm using as a value play that isn't getting much ownership. So I do like's not the right word, but Leo Jimenez, 2,300 at shortstop, getting 5% ownership. His range of outcomes just cannot be that much worse than somebody like LeMahieu or Drury or Solano. It's a little bit worse because he's not on the Yankees, and in Solano's case, he's not batting in the middle of the order. But I'll take my chances on somebody like that, especially where I am stacking the team that he's on. So if my Toronto stacks are doing well, Jimenez's projection would be higher. Like, Toronto does well, his projection is higher. So using that correlation there at low ownership, I do like. Nicky Lopez makes sense as well. 2,100 leading off. Doesn't have a lot of power, but he does negatively correlate with Luis Gil. He does have some stolen base upside, so it's not like he needs to hit a home run to give you a decent score at 2,100. Shortstop's not the best position, so that is nice as well. Opportunity cost isn't as high as it is on some slates. Luis Gil's been slightly below average at controlling the running game as well. Not terrible at it, but someone that I would think Nicky Lopez potentially runs on if he gets on base. Right around the field on Witt, Neto. Looking at what the field is doing, I mentioned Willie Castro before, but not getting too much of him. I think I have like 5% combined. He's projected for 9. Perdomo, field's getting to 8%. I have like 3. So he looks like a value shortstop that the field is using, and he's just going to be like twice as popular as somebody like Leo Jimenez. I'll take Jimenez because I'm stacking Toronto a lot more than I'm stacking Arizona. So Arizona looks like a team that I'm not getting to as much today as the field. Again, they have a high implied run total. I don't think that you're wrong if you say that you would rather play Arizona than play Toronto, or play Arizona than play Texas rather. But I'm getting to those teams more than I am Arizona. TTID said, are we worried about Davis Daniels' numbers against righties, even though it's a smaller sample size? Not particularly. The way that I view it is, one, we expect him to be better against righties just because he's right-handed, but he doesn't project to be a particularly good pitcher overall. We're only talking about 25 major league innings so far, 5 total starts. I expect his numbers against righties to end up being worse than they are right now. They probably will still be better against righties than lefties. I would prefer it if Vlad Guerrero was a left-handed hitter, but I'm still going to want to play Vlad Guerrero against what I think is a below-average major league pitcher, is basically the way that I look at it. Same goes for George Springer. Same goes for Kirk. I like that they do have Loperfido and Horwitz along with Varsho from the left side now. That's going to make that stack just look more appealing as a whole than when you had like Justin Turner from the right side and whoever else they had earlier this year that I'm blanking on. Bichette. Obviously, I wouldn't mind if Bichette was in the lineup, but another right-handed bat. So you do get a little bit more balanced top of the order for Toronto, which is good as well, going up against Daniel. Looking at the outfield to wrap this one up, I think there was one other question. Drop Rosa said, any interest in Mickey Moniak? He's been hitting up lately. If I'm stacking the Angels, sure. I'm looking at the outfield now. It doesn't look like I have much of him, but yeah, I have like 6%. I'm pretty much with the field. I have 6%. Field's at 6%. He's 2,800. The value looks fine, but obviously there is a lot of opportunity cost in the outfield as well. And so now we get back to the Yankees, and this is another reason that the Yankees are getting so much ownership and why they still look good, I think. Even though Alex Verdugo isn't great, he's not a really good power hitter or anything like that, you have a $3,200 leadoff hitter on a team with like a 6-run total. It just, when you think about what, not only the Yankees' chances of success compared to every other team on the slate, but also what you can put around that team. The value that you're getting from a lot of these Yankees bats, whether it's Verdugo, LeMahieu, Volpe, Wells, like these 4K and below guys that, in at least like Verdugo and Wells' cases, have good lineup spots also, you're getting really high upside around them too. So it makes it so they actually don't even have to do quite as much. Like if the Yankees were just priced across the board, like a team with a 6+ implied run total, and Verdugo were 4,500 and Stanton was 5,600 and Judge, who's already almost 7K, was, I don't know, like 8K, just for the sake of what I'm about to say, then like they actually have to go out there and score 8, 9, 10 runs, and a lot of it be via homer for you to have a chance. But when this team is just priced the same or cheaper, other than Judge and Soto, as other teams on the slate with much lower implied run totals, it just creates a situation where the Yankees don't even have to do that much, because you're going to have such high upside, both pitching and one-offs and mini stacks around them, that the chances of them being the winning team are just really, really high. So Verdugo, I'm 2x the field right now, even though he is getting 16% ownership. I'm 2x the field, give or take, on Stanton. Nothing to dislike about that matchup. Absolutely fantastic spot for Giancarlo Stanton, going up against an unproven young lefty. Doesn't miss a lot of bats. Stanton, strikes out less against lefties generally anyway, as you would expect, but really, really good spot for him. Kai Busch, depending on the projection source, projects for like a 16 to 18% strikeout percentage. He was striking out 18.8% or sorry, he spent most of the year at Double A this year, where he was striking out 24.5% of hitters. But again, that's Double A. Just does not project to be a good strikeout pitcher. Absolutely love Stanton here. I like Varsho a lot. He's getting some ownership. Judge obviously looks fantastic too. Leody Taveras, I am using as a value play some. Not surprising. He fits into those Texas stacks. He's just really cheap at 2,300. He's batting ninth. But as we've seen, you kind of just need those cheap guys. We've seen, it's not like I'm taking some huge stand on a $2,300 guy for no reason. You're seeing the field play all of these cheap guys because they do open up the Yankees. They open up the pitching you want to get to. They open up, anything else that you want to get to in your lineup. So they're kind of just like a necessary evil on this slate. Juan Soto, I'm around the field. I do like that I'm getting Shohei Ohtani here in the outfield. I had mentioned that I was getting to the Dodgers as mini stacks when I went through the stacks portion of the show, and then I only had like 2% Ohtani at first base. So I was a little bit concerned that I was like playing Dodger stacks but not playing Ohtani, which doesn't seem like the most productive thing. But I am getting to him in the outfield here. So cumulatively, I'm around 2x the field on Shohei Ohtani when you include his first base exposure. I like that against a 15% owned Peralta. Clearly, you're going to be happy about getting to Ohtani. Not too far off the field on Corbin Carroll leading off. Gives you stolen base upside in addition to whatever he does with the bat. Benintendi batting third, kind of the same play as Nicky Lopez, except apparently he can hit 2 home runs in a game sometimes. I think he just did that somehow, but it's just an example of, he's getting 4% ownership. We can even call it 5 or 6% ownership, whatever. He's negatively correlated with Luis Gil. So in non-Gil lineups, he makes sense. But you just can't tell me that Benintendi's range of outcomes batting third is that much worse than pick whatever 8 or 9 hole hitter in his price range the field is playing at 2 or 3 times the ownership. It's just not that much different. And so you're getting a low-owned guy that's a decent enough point per dollar value and negatively correlates with Gil. So it's not Andrew Benintendi love. It's not Nicky Lopez love. It's certainly not White Sox love, but they do make sense when you think about what you're trying to do in tournaments. A little bit over the field on Garcia, Springer, La Porfido. I kind of was hoping I'd have more La Porfido just because he's 2,500. He's in that same price range with a bunch of these guys that I'm saying, the field is playing and that I don't really love. I do like the matchup a lot for La Porfido. He is left-handed, but getting to 10%, which, is fine. And then just kind of mixing and matching my way through the rest of the outfield. As far as guys that I'm not getting to that the field is, again, pretty much in line with most of them. A little bit under the field on McCarthy. I'm around the field total on Josh Smith. I have like 8%, I think it was, at third base. I had like 10% Schneider at second base, so I'm around the field there. Not quite getting to as much Peterson as the field, so another Diamondback. That seems to be kind of the trend, is I'm around half the field on a lot of these Diamondbacks guys, whether it was the catcher, Ketel Marte, Peterson. I'm a little under on Carroll. So that seems kind of like the popular team that I'm not getting to. But other than that, it does seem like I'm pretty much in line with the field on a lot of stuff. Not taking many like huge stands on low-owned guys, which does just kind of come back to, I think the field is projected to play this slate close to correctly. I wouldn't be shocked if you go back and look at like post-contest sims after this slate and find out that there were just either less players that had a positive expectation, or the expectation of the winning players was just lower than usual on a slate like this, where it's just hard to find alternate paths that are not extremely, extremely low probability. And the other thing to keep in mind too, when you're talking about stuff like that and stacks, and this kind of, it relates to, what we were talking about with Atlanta stacks against Snell and San Francisco stacks against Sale, et cetera. Not only are they probably going to actually be like 3-4% owned instead of 1% because of people using Sims more, but in these massive field tournaments, that's still a pretty big number. So it's not like if Chris Sale or if Blake Snell struggles and you 5-man stack the Braves and the Braves are just the winning team, that you just like win this tournament. In the $5 tournament on DraftKings, if we say that there are 3% Brave stacks, and say that they are the team you have to have to win, you're still competing with like 1,800 entries that are 5-man Brave stacks. So like, obviously you're in a good spot if you stack the Braves and they light up Snell, but it's such a large field tournament that you're still competing with a ton of entries and you played a really low probability team to do it. So that's, I think, another reason why you kind of just see the most likely plays kind of just shaking out at the top. It's not like I'm going too crazy, jamming a lot of the Yankees in, although I am, pretty aggressively getting to Verdugo and Stanton at their salaries and lineup positions. I think they're a little bit underowned, but it's kind of just the lower probability plays are probably correctly owned, if not overowned, and it's just driving me back to the most popular guys. So I don't love it. I certainly prefer building lineups and saying like, oh, the field's not playing this team and they look really good to me. I have a clear path to winning, if this works out. That's not how this slate looks. But again, I don't really think the answer is to just say like, screw it, I'm not playing any of the best plays today. I hope that, a bunch of really, really low probability stuff happens. Drop Rosa said, do I like Rocky stacks more than Braves due to the matchup? I don't think I was getting a lot of either one. I'm not really getting, you can see Atlanta, Colorado, San Francisco down here at the bottom for me. I wasn't getting the San Diego much even before the lineup came out. I assume that Machado not being in is not going to help that. Can take a look. I do want to take a look at some of my 5-man Yankee stacks because this is kind of what I was alluding to at the top of the show. I don't love how the ownership was allocated. I guess it's not like super popular, but popular pitching, 5-man Yankee stack with pretty popular Yankees, Varsho, Clement, Solano. There's just nothing really low owned there. It's not really what I love seeing when I'm going into a tournament as big as the $5 on DraftKings. But again, the counterpoint too is just I don't really know what the alternative to that is. But I think it's probably to just at least be a little bit more creative with the secondary stacks, probably not playing a popular Corbin Carroll and Del Castillo and Bell with the Yankees. I do like that this lineup has Jazz and Volpe because they were two of the lower owned Yankees. It doesn't have LeMahieu, who was one of the more popular ones. So it's a relatively different Yankee stack, but pairing them with Arizona in a massive field tournament isn't my favorite thing. And I do have this sorted by ownership. So that's why we're seeing these ones at the top that I don't like quite as much. But that was, kind of one thing that I didn't really like as much. If we scroll down here, maybe we'll like these a little bit more. 5-man Yankee stack with Solano and Bogarts, Kike Hernandez one off, a couple lower owned guys there. But you can see too, how much weaker that lineup looks. Brady Singer in that lineup too, so not getting much ownership there. But you can see how much weaker that lineup looks as well. You have Heel, but you don't have any of Sale or Snell or Peralta or Fod. So you're giving up projection there to get the Singer to be contrarian. Solano and Bogarts isn't the most appealing 2-man. Kike against Peralta, if he's even in the lineup, doesn't look good at all. So, it's kind of the problem you run into, and it's still projected to be somewhat popular, Bogarts and Solano at least. So I think ultimately it's just kind of a difficult slate to play because of how good the popular plays look compared to the less popular plays and the size of the slate. Somebody asked for thoughts on Addison Barger. He's not in the projected lineup I used, so I don't really have thoughts. If he's in, it does give you another left-handed bat, but I can't really speak on it because he wasn't in the projected lineup I used. Jake had said elevated pinch hit risk for San Francisco bats. Conforto and Wade on the bench. Yeah. I did mean to mention too, I am getting over the field on him. I mentioned Michael Massey. He is DHing. So he's leading off. He's DHing. The problem with him DHing does mean that it is easier to pinch hit for him if Minnesota were to bring in a left-handed reliever to face him. Obviously, there's no guarantee that happens. The Twins do have 2 left-handed relievers. One of them did throw 30 pitches yesterday and 20 pitches 3 days ago, so I don't know whether or not he'll be available. The other has not pitched in a week, so he will be. But that is one negative on Massey. But again, he is leading off. He does negatively correlate. So, Josh said, can I mention pitcher ownership? I mentioned it at the start, but I can just double back because it was really easy. I'm pretty much around the field or slightly over on the 4 main guys, Sale, Snell, Fod, Heel. Around the field on Peralta. The only guy getting 10+% ownership I'm not getting to was Pablo Lopez. Tough strikeout matchup. Still a high ceiling guy, but just doesn't project as well for me as these other guys. And he's getting similar ownership to Peralta. So Peralta just was the one that I got to against the Dodgers. But yeah, Pitching, I'm playing pretty straightforward, at least as of now. If nobody else has any questions, thanks for checking out the show. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to Endgame Syndicate using the link in the description below. Great Discord over there. A lot of really good players in addition to the four of us, Brick75, Utical, Nerdy Tenor, and myself. A lot of other really good players hang out in there, talk. A lot of just good strategy discussion. I learn from members and the people I work with. So I've really enjoyed it. If you're somebody that takes DFS seriously and you understand the basics and all of that, and you're trying to improve, trying to get better, I think it's a really, really good place to be. I wish it had existed at some point in the last 10 years previously. So check that out. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff. I'll be back here tomorrow doing the same show at the same time or somewhere around there. I don't know the actual start time for the slate, but somewhere around 5 p.m. tomorrow. Thanks again for checking out the show.